Hello and welcome everyone to Women's Health Tech Wednesdays. I am your host, Nina Joshi. A couple of quick announcements before we bring on our two guests for today. We have our February symposium coming up at the end of the month, and we also have our HIT Lab Innovators Summit in person in May in New York City. The tickets and information for both of these events are available in the chat. And with that, would like to formally introduce our guest for today. Would like to welcome back Nuzi Barkatally, as well as formally welcome Rachel Yee from Silicon Valley Bank. Really excited about our conversation today. And as you all know, we love questions here at Women's Health Tech Wednesday. So if you have any for Rachel or for Nuzi, please use the Q&A feature or the chat, and I'll make sure that we get to it. With that, thank you both so much for being here today.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
I am so excited to dive in and really just learn a little bit more about the two of you, the work that you're doing. There's, I think, so many exciting things to talk about, but maybe a great place to start. And Nuzi, I know that you've been kind of on the show before, so would love for, I think, the both of you to share a little bit more just about your background, your kind of journey, what has really led you to where you are right now at Silicon Valley Bank. And maybe, Rachel, we can start with you.
Sure, sounds good. So my background is in, well, first of all, Rachel, I am based in New York. My background is in biochemistry. I have a degree in biochemistry from the University of New Hampshire. Right after school, I started working in a lab during COVID in 2020, which was kind of a crazy time to be working in a lab. And I did that for just about 2 years and was kind of feeling like I needed a change and wanted to be involved a bit more in industry. I do, miss being in the lab and I love working with my hands and kind of that technical aspect of it, but I was looking for a more well-rounded experience. And one thing led to another, and SVB popped up on my radar. And yeah, here I am today from that. It's been definitely an interesting journey. If you told me in, my senior year of college that I'd be working at SVB. I had heard of SVB because I had friends who had worked here. I never thought I could work here, but here I am now, and it's been really cool.
That's incredible. And I would imagine that even just having like bench work experience or like lab experience has probably been just a really interesting lens with all of like the life science work that you all do.
Yeah, absolutely. Being to really understand, the founder side, but also kind of where they're gearing towards, if they're going to eventually be working with, they're in like big industry labs. I've, been the scientist in those shoes, working in those labs and kind of have a different perspective, almost, the founders kind of from the top down, but, working as the bench scientist there, it's kind of the bottom up. So really rounding out the whole experience for both the founder and, the employee.
100%. Yeah. So you've seen it all. You've seen on like all ends of the spectrum, which is pretty amazing.
Yeah, it's been pretty cool.
That's incredible. And then Nuzi would love if you could share just like a quick intro.
About similar to Rachel, I kind of worked in industry before I came into banking, but I worked more on the health tech side, working at digital health startups. The last startup I was at was a children's mental health startup, and have kind of worked with different accelerators, mentoring founders, and somehow made my way to SVB as well. And actually, Rachel and I kind of started at SVB around the same time. So it's been fun. We have a really great team, and we get paid to just work with all of these healthcare founders. That's like pretty amazing. So
that sounds like a great time to me. I love that. And I think on that note, would love if you can share a little bit more about kind of, your role at SVP and how the bank kind of works with life sciences, healthcare clients to kind of support them. Would love a nice overview, I think would be really helpful.
Yeah, so I'll kick it off and I'll let Rachel chime in. But we have a national practice for our early stage healthcare and life science founders. And with the way the bank works is like we kind of have an early stage team, and then once you raise your Series A, you move on to our growth stage team, and so on. But we work at the early stage side. And as I mentioned, we have folks across the US. So Rachel sits in New York, I sit in LA. And I work more on the business development side. I kind of jokingly say I get to do all the fun stuff at the bank. I get to host a lot of events. I get to, help our founders with kind of like founder success and introductions to investors or ecosystem partners. And then I work closely with our with folks like Rachel on the banking side. And I'll let Rachel kind of like add a little bit more to that.
Yeah, sure. So on my side, I really help, give a more of a white glove service to our clients with their day-to-day banking needs. So, opening up different kinds of accounts, how they should be structuring their accounts, and, how we can help them set up with their best foot forward. And then additionally to that, if they can get connected with myself or anyone on my team first, then we are able to connect them with our team members like Nuzi, who are able to provide that really interconnectivity within the ecosystem if that's something that they're looking for.
Wow, that's incredible. I mean, it seems like it's such like a holistic service that's being offered to these really, really early stage founders. I think on that note, I'm so curious, and I know, we get a lot of founders who are listening in, and you both have, eyes and ears really in the startup landscape. For kind of these earlier stage companies or these early stage founders, are there any kind of, key just considerations just based off of the experience that you've had, any, common pitfalls that you see, any just words of advice or wisdom? I know, of course, it's very, very bespoke, I'm sure, but if there's any just broader themes or insights, and maybe Rachel, we could start with you, because I'm curious to see your, like, if there's a life science kind of edge to it as well, because I would imagine life science and digital health have very different kind of considerations.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say for life science founders, it's really important to see how you're diversified, in your specific sector or indication, and really find those differences, compared to other companies or who's coming up. You hear oncology, and there's so many different oncology companies, but really finding the difference in your founder story too, because I think a lot of times with life sciences, the founder story can get lost because people are so focused on the therapeutic and how it's being developed and whatnot. But I think learning about the founders and, if you're talking to an investor, really making sure that that relationship is good, and that it's not just all about the therapeutic you're building or all about the tools and diagnostics and whatnot.
That's really helpful. I like that.
Yeah, I mean, to like reiterate kind of what you're saying, like, a really key thing is like figuring out how you're differentiating from what else is out there. I think like figuring that out is like really, really key. And like, what Rachel's saying, like the story that you share is going to be the reason why these investors invest in you. And so I think, this can happen on both like the life science side and on the health tech side. Like you see an opportunity, you're like, okay, we're going to do this, but like really kind of sharing your why and why you're building this company, I think goes a really long way. And with your investors, this is going to be a long-term relationship. So I always say that like you want to try to build those relationships early, even before you're planning to fundraise. And so, sometimes you can kind of go out to folks, to investors, or to just, anybody around you and be like, hey, I want your advice. I would love to get your feedback. And investors like love this. They want to see things early. They want to kind of keep an eye on you. And so if you're able to do that, depending on kind of like the network that you have, and if you don't have that network, then do that with anybody who like knows about the startup economy, and the startup ecosystem. Because I get that like not everybody has an investor network right away, but there are ways to kind of go out and build that. And don't be, you don't think you can't do that, because you can. But getting feedback early, building those relationships early, I think investors too also want to feel like this isn't going to be transactional. They want to like know who you are, know kind of like your why. And so, yeah, I would say that is kind of like the biggest piece of advice I'd have.
I love that. And I think on that note too, for anyone that is, gearing up to raise or kind of in the raising process right now this year, I like how you kind of are both really touching on like the power of that personal story, of that why, and that investors really look for that. Are there any other things that you think are kind of important to investors, specifically in early stages, as it relates to like, models or, sustainability or anything along those lines that you kind of have seen investors care a little bit more about or place more weight on?
Yeah, I mean, especially this year after like the past few years, like, there's definitely much more emphasis on sustainability, getting to profitability, which is harder to do on the life science side. But on the health tech side, I think like figuring out your business model can be tricky. I mean, but there's only like, 3 groups that you're selling to, 3 or 4. You have like the providers, the payers, employers, and then if you're going to go direct to consumer. And so that's really like the only groups that you have to sell to. And I always recommend founders to have a parallel path when they're figuring out their business model. So let's say you really want to go after employers or payers. It's helpful to start going first direct to consumer to kind of get that direct feedback and some traction. So you have leverage going into those conversations when you're selling to payers or to employers. And so I think like, understanding like, here's the product or the service and the need that you're fulfilling with that, but getting creative with the business model, I think is also really important, and figuring out ways that you can kind of get some of that traction to, show how long it might take to get to profitability, which is hard to do, but investors definitely want to see that this year. So, and I'll let Rachel add maybe on the life science side, if there's anything.
Yeah, absolutely. On life science side, I would say sometimes there's, when you're building a therapeutic, there's so much data and so many studies that you're looking at, and really trying to fine tune and pick out what are the most important numbers that I need that are going to help push this forward so that I can get to my in vivo study. And then I'll have the data that an investor will want to see so that they can, they're going to want to put that investment in, is very important, because I think a lot of time, these scientists are so passionate about what they do, and, they're giving their pitch and they're talking and talking and talking, but it's like, okay, how can we solidify this into a couple sentences of like, this is what I've done, this is the most important, and this is where I'm going.
I like that. I think just in general, that's kind of good advice. I think that's really helpful. Thank you both. Kind of next question that I'm kind of curious about too, just thinking about the broader phase for kind of, banking needs. Is there such a thing as like how early is too early for a startup to be engaged or just be having to be thinking about like having a banking partner?
I mean, we might be biased, but like we're like, as soon as you start the company, the inception, as soon as you get like the paperwork. But I really think, and I've said this before in like our past kind of Women's Health Tech Wednesdays, is that the most important thing for when you're starting the business is finding people and partners that are going to help you, and like building that relationship early. And so while, you might not have money in the bank, you might not have, fundraised, like, gotten VC funding just yet, but, having partners where you can build that relationship and they can kind of, exponentially help you, early on with that network, with those connections. That's really important, whether it is like Hit Lab, whether it is SVB, whatever it is. Like, I think really, finding those partners early is important. And also like, we like to get to know you too. Like, we like to have that relationship with you early too, so that when it comes to the time when you are fundraising, when we kind of reach out to our network, we know you as a founder and we can kind of really vouch for you in that way. We don't want to be transactional either, so I think, getting all of that set up as early as you can, and even with your like law firm too, obviously you'll probably have that earlier than banking if you're kind of doing all the paperwork to set up your company. But I really think like finding these people, not just as like a bank and a law firm, it's like who are going to be the people and the partners that are really going to accelerate you, and who you like, that you just like interacting with. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really important to start building those relationships early so that, you really have a memorable relationship, with someone like myself or Nuzi, so that we're able to, I have tons and tons of clients. So when, I hear something like, oh, women's health, whatever it is, I have, the top 5 people that pop into my head. So you want to build that relationship. So, you're kind of
top
first
of
in
mind.
line there.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
That's I love that. And when you both are not interfacing with founders, I would imagine there's still so much other like collaboration and partnerships just kind of with broader like industry players as well. Would love if you could share a little bit more about kind of the partnerships or kind of the collaboration that you kind of do with SVB, just kind of on an industry scale, and what that looks like.
Yeah, I mean, like we are, obviously HitLab is a really great partner. We like to partner with really great organizations that are also helping founders and supporting founders. We're at all of the big conferences like Health and Bio and making sure we have like a presence there. And we like to partner with a lot of VC firms when it comes to doing events. I mean, I would say it runs across the spectrum in terms of, how in which we want to support founders and the type of partners that we want to work with. But yeah, I don't know, Rachel, if you had anything to add to that as well.
Yeah, I'd say I'd say most any, partners, accelerators, incubators, anything like that, we definitely have someone that knows someone there, and we're able to kind of foster a connection, which is a really great and beautiful thing because we're able to really round out where we sit in the marketplace, and everyone hopefully knows who we are and that we're able and ready to help them.
The power of networking. I love that so much. I kind of wanted to a little bit shifting gears because I'm so curious. I think because we have like a life science expert and we have a digital health expert on the call. I'm so kind of curious in these like respective industries that are so similar in so many ways, but also have some key differences. How do you kind of see the role of I'll just say technology more broadly, kind of being in this space? I'm so kind of curious in like this, post-COVID haze, but we're still seeing some interesting, just broader technology advancements, like adoption advancements. I'm just kind of curious to see your guys' take on it.
You want to kick it off, Rachel?
I think there's I'll let you have it.
I mean, I think it's interesting on the tech side across both life science and within health tech. Obviously, things like Chat GPT and generative AI and AI agents are absolutely going to change the landscape within life science and within health tech. I think the biggest thing is like technology is always going to advance, but it's really in the way in which the way in which you use it. That needs to be like, you need to be creative. You need to understand, what are the inputs, what are the outputs? You need to think about like ethics and bias and all of these things. And also like you need to think about an entire workflow. Like I think what gets lost is people think, oh, we're gonna like, do the tech on this and like, it'll be amazing, but like there's people involved in that. And like if you look at an entire workflow, like tech is like one piece of that, even when it comes to like things like drug development and stuff like that. Like I've heard a lot about how some of these like big drug development companies are like, yeah, we're going to use AI and all this stuff. And like things weren't able to really change because you have to really think about the organizational design around that and the process around that. Like now that you have all of these insights, what do you do with that? Like ultimately, the people are making the decisions based off of the insights and the data that's coming out of these tech platforms. And so I think it's a lot harder to do than most people think that like, tech is just going to be a solve for things. And I think the right startups really know that, like the ones that are going to be really successful really understand that. And so, yeah, I think it'll be an interesting year, I think, for sure, for this year to understand. I mean, obviously within the health tech space, AI has been a huge area of funding and is basically getting like 3x, 4x compared to like the regular health tech investments. It's probably more than that. I'm just like throwing out a number, but it definitely has gotten a lot of funding. And I think that might be slowing down because you have to, it'll still be more than the general like health tech landscape, but you have to really think through like how are these technologies going to be implemented, and what's the process around that, the entire workflow around that.
Totally. It's like not kind of building it in a vacuum.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can just add in on there from a personal note of like being in the lab, we would run these tests and then we'd run them through files. And while it would highlight of what what we need to flag and not to flag, we still always had to have that human eye in there to, double check everything and make sure that it's okay and it's correct and the computer's running everything as it should be. And or sometimes, there's other abnormalities that come up that maybe the computer didn't necessarily catch because the AI is still learning too as well. So I think almost, and I guess for lack of a better term, that counterculture, and we have AI, we have this all this machine learning that's helping us, but also we need to take a step back sometimes and be like, okay, let me look at this myself with a human eye, and how is this actually going to work in the human world?
It's like working, yeah, kind of working together with the tech instead of like one or the other with the tech.
Mhm.
Exactly.
I'm also kind of curious too, for both of you, is there just any like innovation trend, just something that's kind of exciting you? Like, and is there a particular area of a lot of like attention that you're seeing that's really exciting, or a new innovation that kind of has you excited?
I don't know for me if there's like any sort of like tech or innovation, honestly, that gets me so excited, but it's really about like women's health. Like I think I'm more excited to see more funding going into women's health, like an area that obviously we all think is extremely important and that, we think is going to be like an interesting next few years. And knowing that it, currently still doesn't get enough funding. Female founders within health tech also do not get enough funding. And, I really want to make sure we're able to like focus and advocate on those areas so that they can get more funding. So I know I'm not like fazed by crazy cool innovation and tech, especially if we're not seeing the numbers go to areas where they should be.
100%. I love
Yeah,
that.
I'd say for myself, definitely women's health, absolutely. And a big part of that as well, and a big space right now is longevity studies. And I think
Mm.
longevity for women as well. And,
Yeah.
finding all that preventative care and making sure, we're getting the tests that we need, and we have the information that we need and that it should be readily available to us. Because I'm sure we've all struggled with finding out, what's wrong, what's going on with me. My doctor tells me one thing, I'm reading something else online. And taking the time to, I personally love, I'll go in and like read a journal study on a certain case or condition of something. I don't know, maybe I'm a hypochondriac or something I'm worried about. um
I
but
do think that like for women, and this is kind of going down a side note, is like, we often, it's hard for us to navigate the system. We are often gaslit in the healthcare space as well. And we have mystery symptoms, women are more likely to get autoimmune, to get migraines, anxiety, depression, and like, we're still not getting the care that we need, and it takes longer to get diagnosed. We spend more on our own healthcare overall than men. So yeah.
100%. And I so agree. And Rachel, kind of what you were saying too, around just the idea of like just empowerment and being very well informed as, as a driver of your own health. So that very much, I do that too. So that very much resonated with me. Now I kind of wanted to ask, I mean, I've been really picking both of your guys' brains a lot around just kind of the broader life science and healthcare landscape, but I also want to ask you as just two, professionals that are working in these jobs, like kind of as just so curious, like, do you have any tips, any practices? How do you stay motivated? How do you stay energized in a very high demand job, especially in a very in large industry? Is there any kind of like tips or tricks that you guys do just to, stay good, stay energized, have that just personal well-being aspect?
yeah, sure. I think for me personally, I've I think, and especially now, if in New York, it's cold and dark, so can struggle with the seasonal depression here and there. But something that's really important for me is just making sure I'm like getting out and moving and kind of getting my endorphins going is something that really just does like put a smile on my face, whether it's just, and I find that instead of just maybe going to the gym for, a big 2 hour chunk, but taking maybe three like 30-minute walks per day just to kind of get my mind going or, keep myself moving, really does just put a smile on my face more so than, super tight schedule of, and, maybe some people don't necessarily have the leisure to do that all the time. But I'm lucky enough to have a bit more of a flexible schedule where if I need to, get up and go for a 30-minute walk outside or go stretch or do something like that, just making sure you're really taking care of your body really helps your mental state as well.
Nice. I like that.
Yeah, and I think for me, I have really good friends who, I think working in general in like any sort of corporate environment, there's like stuff you're navigating as a woman, stuff you're navigating within the larger ecosystem, and things you're constantly kind of dealing with. And I think, especially when it comes to leadership, uh, you're you're never out there like you're never going to get to certain places on your own. And so it's helpful for me to have some sort of tribe and people that not only that I can kind of confide in, but can give me really loving but straightforward advice. And that happens both, like I think within, your colleagues and your work environment, if you can find other really great women that you can kind of get advice from or confide in. And also like I have really good dear friends that just give me such great advice as I like navigate, just moving up and moving into leadership positions. So I would say that finding your tribe is like so key.
I love that. And wholeheartedly agree. Actually, Nuzi, this was like a great segue because I just realized that we are kind of closing in on time. So wanted to ask the last question, which is my favorite question to ask, which is if you both have any just words of wisdom, career advice that you can share with us, maybe something that a mentor or a friend has shared with you that you would like to pass it on. I would love to hear it.
Should I go first?
Yeah, hop in first.
I think this is really hard, but I feel like really tuning into yourself and knowing your worth is incredibly important. I think for women, it's hard. It's hard navigating just a work environment. It's hard standing up for yourself. It's hard advocating for yourself. And so I think this goes back to kind of also like the habits of like just finding ways where you can tune into yourself and like know your worth in any of those environments. And maybe that is like, having confidence in doing like strength training and working out or having friends or whatever it might be. But like, yeah, just knowing your worth, knowing what your value is and how you can interact with the world that way.
I love that.
Yeah, I'd say being, always expecting the unexpected and being comfortable with change and knowing who you are when things are changing very rapidly and finding ways to deal with that in a proper manner. So you're not kind of, I think, I'm sure everyone has, a big life event happens and you kind of want to shut down. But, as you get older and, I'm learning this now, like as a young woman growing up, as more things happen, you kind of realize those same emotions are, hitting you all at once again. So knowing how to deal with them and making friends with those emotions rather than trying to shoo them off or, absorb them too much or kick them away, whatever it is, really just accepting them for what they are and then finding a way to deal with them properly in whatever situation you're in, or knowing when to put things aside or knowing when to confront something.
That's so beautiful. Wow, those were both so incredible. Thank you both so much for such an amazing conversation. Really appreciate you guys taking the time to chat with us today.
Thanks, Nina. Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Nuzi and Rachel. Just make sure that you join us next time for our next Women's Health Tech Wednesdays. Wanted to give a shout out to our sponsors for sponsoring this incredible conversation, as well as one last shout out to Nuzi and to Rachel. And we will see you all next Wednesday. Bye, everyone.